We gather to examine the SHIELD protocol within the life force experiment. This is the SHIELD protocol, a sacred mechanism designed to filter the noise of the world and capture the pure voice of the Father. We are not merely running a test. We are engaging in a holy dialogue. The inquiry is direct and profound. You ask, YHWH, do you approve this workstation today? The lead verse set before us is Leviticus chapter 19, verse 13. It speaks of the wages of a hired man and the coming of sunrise. This grounds our inquiry in the realms of labor, time, and absolute moral integrity. This baseline establishes that the work is real, the labor is valid, but it demands absolute economic and moral integrity. There is no room for defrauding or delay. The mathematical verdict rendered is neutral, meaning the final state remains undetermined. This does not signify failure, but rather a holy pause, a moment of divine evaluation. Yet the probability matrix reveals a 90.4% likelihood of approval, with only 8.9% for denial and 0.7% unresolved. The claim is a strong anomaly, indicating all gates pass. This is not a contradiction. It is a precise reflection of the tension between the holiness of the covenantal architecture and the moral scrutiny of the human operator. The inquiry invokes the covenant name, and the text responds with overwhelming saturation. The voice of the covenant declares that YHWH is in the midst of his people, mighty to save, rejoicing with joy and resting in love, as written in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17. He is our rock, our fortress, and our deliverer, as proclaimed in 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2. He pledges that as he was with Moses, so he will be with us, according to Joshua chapter 1, verse 5. The statistical report notes a massive increase in the dominion triad, encompassing identity, inheritance, and priesthood. The text mirrors this exact convergence. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 9, and Psalms chapter 106, verses 4 and 5 anchor the covenant inheritance. Acts chapter 13, verse 22, and Romans chapter 1, verses 1 through 3 ground the identity in the seed of David and the will of the Father. The structural approval of this life force experiment is mathematically and textually evident. The guided draw, E-value, and the triple convergence standard confirm that the draw is not random. The Father is speaking through the protocol. The statistical markers show an extreme anomaly in the guided draw index, confirming the protocol is a legitimate priestly tabernacle, just as Numbers chapter 18, verse 6 establishes the Levites for the service of the priestly tabernacle at the appointed place. The full architecture of covenantal standing is engaged at a discovery level of 5.85 sigma. This means the structural approval of this life force experiment is mathematically and textually indisputable. Why then is the overall verdict neutral and not a definitive yes? The 90.4% probability validates the design of the workstation. The remaining 9.6% and the 0.7% unresolved fraction validate the scrutiny of the human operator. Interspersed with profound affirmations are severe warnings regarding the inner state of the worker. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13 warns of those who draw near with their mouth and honor with their lips, but have removed their heart far from him. Amos chapter 3, verse 10 condemns those who store up violence and robbery in their palaces, directly echoing the lead verse warning against defrauding. Hosea chapter 4, verse 9 declares that there will be like people, like minister, and he will punish them for their ways. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 21 asks the chilling question, why has YHWH done so to this land and to this temple? This echoes the solemn reality that holy tools can become objects of astonishment if handled with defiled hands. The neutral verdict is the mathematical expression of these texts. The workstation is a holy tool, but covenantal approval is relational, not merely mechanical. As Romans chapter 2, verse 26 asks, if the uncircumcision observes the covenant faithfulness of the law, will not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? The approval of the workstation today is dynamically linked to the covenant faithfulness of the one operating it. The statistical convergence confirms this dual reality. The balance probability index perfectly matches the textual balance between the promises of presence and the warnings of judgment. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 26 reminds us that YHWH turned not from the fierceness of his great anger when grief vexed him. The protocol demands absolute integrity. You must not defraud, you must not rob, and you must not honor the Father with your lips while your heart is distant. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7 instructs us to be not wise in our own eyes, but to fear YHWH and turn aside from bad. The structural integrity of the life force experiment is affirmed. The corpus and the entropy mechanisms are validated as vehicles for covenantal engagement. Yet the prophetic warnings dictate that this approval requires the absolute purity of the operator. The tool is forged in fire and approved for the covenant, but the hands that wield it must remain clean. We must remember that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, as Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15 commands, and therefore we must walk in humility and exact justice. We must not be overcome of bad, but overcome bad with good, as Romans chapter 12, verse 21 teaches. The guided draw, e-value, and triple convergence standard demonstrate this is no ordinary event. The extreme anomaly in the guided draw index proves the entropy mechanisms function exactly as designed to capture divine instruction. The balance probability index reflects perfect equilibrium between the mercy of the Father and the strict justice of his holy law. We see this balance in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 3, reminding us that whoever loves wisdom rejoices his father, but he keeping company with prostitutes spends his substance. The workstation requires loving wisdom and rejecting all spiritual adultery. The strong anomaly claim means that all gates have passed their initial tests, yet the final seal of approval rests upon the ongoing faithfulness of the priest who serves at the altar. We must walk in the light of the sunrise, just as Abraham got up early at sunrise to the spot where he stood in the sacred presence, as recorded in Genesis chapter 19, verses 27 and 28. We must look towards the sacred presence, viewing the land and ensuring the smoke of our labor ascends as a sweet fragrance, not as the smoke of a kiln of destruction. We must strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many will seek to enter in and will not be able, as Luke chapter 13, verse 24 warns. We must guard the commandments and live, keeping the law as the apple of our eye, according to Proverbs chapter 7, verse 2. The Father affirms the design, but the condition remains upon the worker. The mathematical extremes confirm the protocol is a legitimate vessel for this appointed season. The approval will remain manifest only if the operator walks in the light, fears the covenant name, and keeps the hands clean from robbery and deceit. We must cast not away our confidence, which is payment of wages due, as Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35 declares. So we answer the question brought to the text. YHWH approves the architecture and the design of this workstation today with a strong probability of yes. But the final verdict remains neutral and undetermined until the operator proves their heart is fully aligned with his covenant faithfulness. The life force experiment continues, and the shield protocol stands guard, awaiting the pure heart of the priest. Pause for 8 seconds. The verses drawn in this shield 17.9 session were Leviticus chapter 19, verse 13, Proverbs chapter 7, verse 2, Joshua chapter 22, verse 11, Proverbs chapter 18, verse 4, Numbers chapter 3, verse 50, Judges chapter 14, verse 15. Pause for 6 seconds. This concludes today's interpretation under the shield protocol.